General Manager Joe Hortiz had his final pre-draft press conference, and he doubled down on the improvements he thinks they've made on the interior of the offensive line, but I wouldn't say it's time to panic because it's smokescreen season.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, especially when we get surprise press conferences from Joe Hortiz like we did today, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, Joe Hortiz's first draft, he knocked it out of the park. Brought home 4 immediate impact players from the beginning part of the draft and towards the bottom half of the draft. So it's going to be really exciting to see what he's able to do in his second draft. And we're going to talk about some of the things that he covered at the press conference, like what his draft strategies are, doubling down on, the offensive line and how he feels like it's a better unit. And if they had to play right now, they feel like that they could play a game and be competitive. And of course, we're going to talk about what pick we decided to select in the Locked On mock draft. And I think a lot of you will be very happy.
Yeah, we were very happy with how the board fell to us, and we're excited to get the clip to you guys to show you how the experts felt about it too, because we have a lot of great draft people on this network. And the best thing about the Locked On NFL mock draft, the people making those picks know the exact needs of their team because they cover their team every day, which is just kind of an expertise that's hard to find in that kind of setting. But we were hoping we would hear from Joe Hortiz and get to talk about it before we unveil our 7-round, 2-show mock draft that we're going to drop to start next week as we get our final mock draft of the season. And it delivered. We heard from Joe Hortiz. We got to hear him talk about all the hot button issues that the Chargers are facing going into this upcoming draft, including the offensive line. And I wanted to start with this because I think there's a lot of ways to look at it, but the reaction that Joe Hortiz had when kind of being questioned about the interior of the offensive line perked my ears up a little bit. So when he was talking about the interior of the offensive line, he basically said, when asked by Daniel Popper about like, hey, how do you feel about that unit? He said, I feel like we got better up until this point. We still have the draft ahead of us, but we got better. That quote's from Eric Smith, and I would agree with that, right? But this is where things got a little testy. Daniel Popper definitely got under his skin a little bit because after that he questioned and said, if you go into the season with Zion at center, Bradley Bozeman at left guard, and obviously Mekhi you picked up in free agency is considered an upgrade, but do you feel like that's enough of an improvement for you guys in the interior based on what happened last season? Do you think you improved enough to not have the disaster to kind of what led to the end of last season, right? Fair question. I love the question. Joe Hortiz says, I thought we were pretty good last season, Pop. 11 wins, right? And you hear Pop say, right, but it's an interesting situation, David, where it's like, Pop's 100% right. Like, if you're just switching 2 guys to 2 positions that aren't their natural position and making one big upgrade in Mekhi Becton, that doesn't feel like enough.
No, yeah, it absolutely does not. And I think the only person that you can feel great about is Mekhi Becton at this point in time with the configuration that they are telling us that they are going to go with, right? Zion Johnson switching to a position in the NFL that he has never played before, at least from what we know at any point in his football career. So I think it's definitely warranted to be a little apprehensive about how he's going to be able to switch positions and not only be able to switch, but be able to play at a high level, right? Because the person who played center before, Bradley Bozeman, yes, he was out there and, he was available, but the play was probably subpar, right? I think if we're being honest. And we know that one of the biggest things that was exploited throughout the season and magnified in the playoffs was the interior of the offensive line. So I think, for Joe Hortiz, obviously he's going to try to, support the players that he has on his football team while also not trying to give away too much information because it just doesn't benefit him at all to do that. So he has to be as kind of diplomatic as he possibly can.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what frustrated him about the question is because he is handcuffed, which is why I think he got frustrated. I mean, number one, it doesn't help him at all to tell the rest of the public that the Chargers really need an upgrade at left guard because theoretically a team could trade up ahead of the Chargers to go get a guy they like if they're around the same spot, right? Popper's also asking him to basically say that the guys they just re-signed in the case of, Bradley Bozeman or even in the case of Andre James aren't good enough, which is hard for him to sit up there and say at this point. So I understand it doesn't help the Chargers to kind of admit that there's, big improvements needed there. You have to hope that they kind of see it because no matter what, at this point, you're either playing two guys that really struggled last year as your starting left guard in Bradley Bozeman, who's played the position before, and Trey Pipkins, who hasn't played left guard before, or you're using a guy who's a natural center in Andre James to try to play left guard. And that was something they got into it about a little bit too, because he's like, Andre James never played left guard. Joe Hortiz is saying Andre James has played guard before, or at least they had conversations he'd be comfortable doing it. But flexibility is great. You needed to raise the top end talent of that room. And if two of the three guys are out there, even in different positions, as the same three guys that struggled last season, it's not going to feel like enough. And again, Joe Hortiz shouldn't be really putting that information out there right now, too. So I don't think it's time to panic in that regard. But I did think it was interesting when he was talking about free agency. Popper asked him about it. And this is what he said. You got to make you got to make smart decisions, calculated decisions, and try to build your roster as deep as you can going into the draft so you can sit there and say, let the draft come to you and take the best player available. And he said, I think we were able to accomplish that. And I think he's right in a lot of ways, David, because I think going into the draft, there's not one specific position that you say, hey, if they don't take this guy in round one, their season's tanked. And we know that we went into a couple Tom Telesco drafts feeling that exact way.
Tom Telesco was an expert at painting himself into a corner, making him have to go get a specific position and just hope and pray that the right player was available at that position. And to his credit, or, to how lucky he was, there was a couple of instances that players just fell right into his lap, like Rashawn Slater, like Derwin James, like Asante Samuel Jr., right?
Justin Herbert.
Yeah. Justin Herbert, obviously, one of the biggest examples. But all of those players kind of, fell into his lap. With Joe Hortiz, he did do a great job, I feel like, in free agency saying, okay, hey, I need to add I need to raise the roof of my tight end room. Tyler Conklin. Got it. Cool. Definitely feel good about that move. Had to improve on the offensive line. You get a legitimate upgrade with Mekhi Becton. That I think we can all feel good about. You need to add somebody on the outside that can take some attention away from Ladd McConkey and has some chemistry with Justin Herbert, Mike Williams. Come on back to the Chargers. And that, I think you feel good about the moves that were made. You added some depth on the defensive line. You added some corners, right? So every kind of position group got some love but in free agency. So I feel like he did put himself in a position to be able to see how the draft unfolds and to truly be able to take the best player on his board, knowing that he needs to elevate the talent level on his football team, and he can do that with whichever player he sees fit.
Well, it's a stark difference from the regime prior, but just because what we saw back then was big swings in free agency
and a lot of misses.
Not building the depth. And I think that's one of the big things is just the Chargers built out these contingency plans to where if the draft doesn't fall the way that they want it to, they're not going to be totally screwed at any one position. Like you talked about all the different positions, they spread the wealth out. And as much as we wanted to see them make a big signing, they didn't, but they did handle everything very financially responsibly. And also they ended up building so much depth and backup and contingency plans to where they give themselves the flexibility in the draft they have now. To an extent, right? It still feels like a crop of players or positions that they feel like they should have to get in round one. And the other part of it is the Poona Ford part of it. And that's what Daniel Popper brought up to you. Asked Joe Hortiz about it. He said, hey, we thought we made a competitive offer. And Daniel Popper's take was basically, they probably did, but they probably waited until it was too late because they had the chance before anyone else had a chance to talk to him to get it nailed down. And if they would have given him a good offer to begin with, maybe he doesn't go out there. And I think why that's important today is I don't think we're talking about interior defensive line the same way heading into this draft if they had Poona Ford on the roster.
I guarantee
the next 3
you we're
seasons.
not.
They could still take it, right? You could add strength to strength, but it wouldn't feel like as big of a need as it would right now because you would have had that guy you feel really good in the middle. Maybe you felt like you could complement him later with maybe not a first-round pick, where now it feels like it's very much a realistic possibility in round one. He He also did a touch on Asante Samuel Jr. and basically just said, in less words, that door is closed and it's kind of on Asante Samuel Jr. as far as why he's not back here, not necessarily on us. So I did think that was interesting, but I also thought it was interesting which positions Joe Hortiz thought were the deepest going into this draft class and how they strategize. No, we know they've already done it and can do it when there are deeper positions and how that affects things earlier on in the draft and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys that scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with the top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or you need a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. It's really all about finding the right talent, and if you need help with a marketing campaign, for example, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who has already delivered incredible results elsewhere. Also, posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, you can get multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork can also help you find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com, and right now, post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. There's some more interesting Joe Hortiz comments that I want to get into here, David, including kind of what he thinks going into this draft class are the deepest positions and really how that affects you when you're in his chair and you're trying to make these decisions about who you should take where, when you know that certain positions are deeper than others and potentially you could wait to take them later on in the draft. Not always that simple, but this is what he said per Eric Smith and the Chargers.com, said D-line and running back, I'd say tight end, corner. There are a lot of corners there on the board that we like. Those are probably 4 that stand out. And that's not to say that other positions aren't deep either. So it was interesting to hear that, David, because as we know, they played that game perfectly last season, right? They decided to wait a wide receiver, even with someone with the caliber of Malik Neighbors sitting and staring them right there at number 5 overall. But they took Joe Alt. They waited, and it paid off because they landed 2 premier players at 2 premier positions with Joe Alt and Ladd McConkey. And now he's saying, okay, these are the positions that we know are deep going into 2025.
Yeah, I think D-line, we all kind of know that the consensus is that that's the deepest position group in this draft. They've been raving about that for months. So that
running back too is another one.
Yeah, that's no secret. And then running back, we know there's some real, kind of generational top end talent with Ashton Genty and Omarion Hampton. Like there's several guys that, at the running back position could realistically go in the first round. And I think the one that's probably the most interesting is corner, right? Him highlighting the fact that this is a very deep cornerback class after he hit on 2 corners in the last draft, and added a couple of corners in free agency. So I know he has said, I'm never going to stop looking for corners, and I get it, right? It's obviously a premium position, and the guys at the top end get paid a lot of money to go out there and stop these wide receivers. So yeah, I thought that was interesting here, and I think. That's one of those things, like, I would not be very excited to see the Chargers grab a corner with their first probably 3 or 4 picks, to be quite honest, just because the priority level of other position groups are much higher, in my opinion. But the fact that on the other side of it, that he says that it's deep at that position group makes me feel like, okay, hey, if you want to take a stab at one in the 5th or one of your 4, 6 round picks, then please be my guest.
Yeah, and I think everyone would be like more okay with that. But you have to know with this regime, there's a chance they do it sooner. Yeah, in the first round or first draft, with the position being a bigger need than it was, last year, they waited until the 5th round to address it. We kept saying, when are they going to address the cornerback position? And it came with them taking back-to-back picks in round 5 and hitting on both of them, which is awesome. But it's also a dangerous game, and that's what he had to say when asked, well, what does that mean? He said, well, that's a good question because there's a strategy to it. You also don't want to get greedy, right? Like, oh, wait, we can get somebody later. Well, you could think that way, and then a run could happen at that position. You're like, oh, well, that didn't work. So just take the best player, especially if they are sticking out. So I think that's the other part of it, too, is like it all sounds good theoretically, and it worked out for them last year, but it doesn't always work that way. And the guy you think could be there if you trade back or you want to wait till round 2 to address that position might not be there because
Yeah,
runs
there's no
happen in the
guarantee.
draft all the time. So they also thought it was interesting they didn't bring up guard or center as one of the deeper positions, right? Obviously something we know that they need. Does that mean they could prioritize that earlier? Potentially, right? But he also brought up the wide receiver class too, even though he didn't mention it originally with, the first guys that he talked about. He said, it's a good class per Daniel Popper. He said of the receivers, if I showed you our board, you would say, wow, they got a lot of options. Again, like every receiver class, there's different sizes and profiles of each guy. But I think there's a lot of guys that can help us. And I think it is important in this draft class because I don't necessarily think there's as many, surefire guys, especially not as many as there were last season. But there's a lot of guys that could fill kind of specific roles. And we've seen that with all the day 2 wide receivers, even some of the day 3 wide receivers that we've watched.
Yeah, and I also like the kind of the way he kind of gave a little bit of a window into how he kind of evaluates the wide receiver position as well. When he said, hey, he may not be big, but can he separate, work the outside stem, the vertical stem? Can he track the football? When you're talking about outside receivers, yeah, he gives up some size, but can he run by people? So still has value outside. So he's just kind of saying, hey, I don't have any kind of prototypical type of wide receiver that I'm looking for specifically. I just want to make sure that if I put them out there, that they have the skill set to be able to go attack at that position. So I like the fact that he kind of showed us a little bit about how he kind of evaluates receivers.
Yeah, and it was mostly about, slot receivers or guys that played a lot in the slot, and if they could play outside with the Chargers, considering they already have Lon McConkey, right? And he basically said, okay, well, just because we want someone that can play outside, to pair with Ladd, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be that prototypical outside-looking kind of receiver, that prototype 6'3", 6'4", the Mike Williams, the Ted McMillans, the Jaden Higgins of the world, which is also what I would say if I wanted one of those guys as well, right? I wanted just a big dude on the outside, but
for sure,
I think we've seen it. And he also mentioned, hey, didn't mention him by name, but he said coming out of the draft, or a lot of people wondered whether Justin Jefferson was just a slot receiver.
Yeah, he didn't
Look
say
how that's
Justin
worked
Jefferson,
out.
but like we all know that.
It basically said, there's one guy who's making, some of the most money in the league right now, and people were wondering if he could play outside of the slot coming in. I mean, he was a guy we didn't really mention in that year because the kind of, that narrative that year was that he was a slot receiver. Now he's turned out to be, one of the best receivers
Boy, were
ever.
we wrong.
Historically good. Justin Herbert still deserved the offensive rookie of the year, but either way, though, it was also interesting. He brought up Najee Harris, and as far as kind of their strategy there, one of the things he said is, hey, it doesn't necessarily have to be a complimentary back to Najee Harris because although, we have filled the need with a physical inside the tackles runner, that need could be a need again very quickly, right? And especially with Najee Harris on a 1-year deal, I thought that was interesting because basically he's saying, hey, we might not just look for that home run threat. And again, that's what I would say if I wanted someone that was more of a complimentary back and I wanted people to maybe think I would take somebody that has more of a Najee Harris type skill set. But one more part I wanted to touch on I thought was pretty cool was him talking about how the scouts lied up on the day 3 picks. He talked about how much he loves his compensatory picks and how even though the Chargers compensatory picks this year are coming in round 6 and they end up with 4 6th round picks, that is actually where these scouts love to be. I mean, he said day 3 is when, and I'll say this again on Friday night, day 3 is when the scouts get really excited and the coaches too, because they've looked at all of these players. You sit there and you're looking at what's left on the board and you say, okay, who do you guys love? So that's when you see the conviction come out. To have 4 6th round picks, that's going to be fun. We get to find guys we've got conviction on. It can be any position, and that's the beauty of it. So I really like that from Eric Smith's article, the 5, takeaways from Joe Hortiz's press conference, because that is what separates good teams from great teams, David.
Well, and hey, that's their work being realized, right? The scouts doing the legwork all year round, going from school to school on these long road trips or these late or early flights. Like this is where the fruits of their labors come to life late in the draft, where they can provide their opinions and really kind of stand on a table for a particular type of player that they are really, really want. That's when they can do this. This is kind of like their Super Bowl, right? This is their opportunity to stand up and say, hey, this is the work that I've done. These are the reasons why I believe it so strongly. Take the guy that I want.
Exactly. And for those guys, with these like area scouts and different guys having, watched different parts of the country throughout the year, they're trying to find the value. They're trying to find the diamond in the rough because that's
Absolutely.
how dudes get paid. That's how dudes get promotions inside of a front office. You're the guy that stands on the table for a tar heap still, and then he gets 4 interceptions in his first season, that guy's getting a promotion, right?
Getting a nice little bonus, I'm sure.
100%. And that's how great teams become great, because the Chargers last year, if they had just hit on Joe Wall and Ladd McConkey, they would have been better, but they wouldn't have been nearly as good as they were because they hit on both of those guys in the 5th round. And with 2 kind of late 5th round picks last year and some early 6th round picks this year, there's no reason to think the Chargers couldn't be, find some good players again and find some more diamonds in the rough in the 6th round. And I think you love to see that. And especially with the front office they put together being more in sync over the last year, because they weren't all just getting hired and having to use guys that were already in place. It should be a different kind of process for them and a better process for them. And hopefully they can get it right this year, because as Joe Hortiz also told us, he doesn't think Chad Alexander is going to be there next year when they have this interview. But that could mean also 2 compensatory picks for the Chargers in the 3rd round, which would be kind of nice too. But we did want to give you guys a little piece of our Locked On NFL mock draft and who we decided to go with and how the board could fall to the Chargers. And I think you're going to like who we have picked and what the experts have to say about it, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Did you know the Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports, College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. This is a game changer. I really love this. Very hard to convince my wife to let me take my Xbox with me to the hotel room if we're going and visiting somewhere. A lot easier to skip, to put an Xbox controller and a Fire TV stick in my bag and make it work. And I know I have this downtime. Let me just pull this out. But this is crazy to be able to have an Amazon Fire 4K TV stick, plug that into a TV, and be able to play all the crazy amount of titles that are on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. Insane game changer for on the go, and just the accessibility, how easy it is, the convenience of being able to do it and be able to host, casual little gaming experience you can share. It's such a great option to have, especially on the go. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. All right, David, we're going to do something a little different here, because we did get to do our Locked On NFL mock draft and have all of the experts from around the Locked On Podcast Network get together and say who they think they should take with their picks, people who cover their team every single day. And we ought to get the thoughts of the Locked On NFL Draft Show. And we appreciate you guys making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, especially with the draft next week, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show with our guy Damian Parson and also Keith Sanchez on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. But I also really enjoyed hearing from Peacock and Williamson, 2 draft guys, the draft dudes themselves, Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino. And David, basically we were put in a position where the board fell well to us, but it came down to a decision. Do you boost the interior defensive line with a guy we really liked in Derek Harmon, or do you take the gift that was sent to you with Colston Loveland making it 222 in this Locked On NFL mock draft?
It was. And honestly, it was not a very long conversation. It was, hey, we have an opportunity to kind of have a hand and glove fit with Colston Loveland, and giving Justin Herbert a dynamic pass catching threat was just too much to pass up.
Yeah, so we're going to show you guys exactly how that went down and who we decided to pick and how the guys wanted to react to it. So it was really good. You can check out the whole entire thing on the Locked On NFL Draft channel, on the Locked On NFL channel, and see why every team ended up going the way they did, and also getting to, how those teams could make the decisions that could lead Colston Loveland to dropping to pick 22, what happened here.
We're on to pick 2022 in the 2025 NFL mock draft. And a popular pick here is another Michigan man for Jim Harbaugh to the Los Angeles Chargers at 22. tight end Colston Loveland, still available, still on the board as we await the selection here for Daniel Wade, who's going to make the pick for Locked On Chargers. And I know we talked about Colston Loveland already a few times. Dame, let's go to the scouting report on him first. And if it is indeed Loveland here, and I know you believe he is a first-round player, is he because I know he played for Harbaugh, so it's weird for me to say maybe he's not a fit for Harbaugh, but Harbaugh showed us last year that he wants a big man before he wants a fast man on that football team, right? And he went offensive line over wide receiver. Could he shock the world here and skip on his Michigan product and go with, say, a defensive lineman or a bigger player rather than maybe a tight end whose best asset isn't blocking?
I mean, they do have a need a defensive tackle, so you could potentially see Derek Harmon here. And with Jim Harbaugh, he is always a wild card, so you never know what could happen with him at the reins. But I do think that he looks at that situation of, I need a tight end. I need another playmaker for my quarterback. It was Ladd McConkey, and that was it against Houston in the playoffs. They need to get another guy. Quentin Johnson is coming along, but he's still dealing with the drops. They don't have a tight end, and I think to play in this offense, not just for Harbaugh, but remember, Greg Roman's the OC. You got to block in the run game too. And Colston Loveland playing at Michigan, they threw the ball probably 15 times a game with J.J. McCarthy. He knows how to run block. He knows what it takes to play in the offense that is led by Jim Harbaugh.
Not only that, I'll jump in and say this, that Harbaugh has a recipe, right, to how he does this. It's run game, but also tight end is very important. If we think about his time going all the way back to Stanford when he was producing a lot of NFL talent at tight ends, and then with the 49ers, right, Vernon Davis was very important to what they did offensively. So I could see Harbaugh being one of those coaches in tight end, quote unquote, being a devalue position. I think he has a tremendous amount of value on what the tight end position is.
It's a great point, Keith. Kobe Fleener. Yep. Obviously, with the 49ers, they had numerous tight ends, all different shapes and sizes, though. So it's important for run pass. And, it's okay to give your quarterback some more weapons there. And they did last year in the second round, not the first round. They did pass on wide receiver. So it's not something that Jim Harbaugh ignores on the offensive side of the ball either. Let's go to the pick. Daniel Wade ready to go. Locked On Chargers with pick number 22.
With the 22nd pick of the 2025 Locked On NFL Mock Draft, the Los Angeles Chargers select Colston Loveland, tight end, Michigan. This is a great way for the board to fall to the Chargers, who end up getting not just one of the top tight ends in this draft class, but one of the top pass catching options, period, in this class. And it is huge because of the way the Chargers had their playoff embarrassment last year, where they hung Justin Herbert out to dry and went into this offseason trying to upgrade the offense around him. They made a couple of moves in free agency to improve the offensive line, which gives them the flexibility to take Colston Loveland, who this Chargers coaching staff knows very well because of his time with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, and get him someone to pair with Ladd McConkey, their young budding superstar, as a core to an offense that has a chance to be really good. Last year, it must have been really tough for Colston Loveland with the Michigan quarterback situation, but now he gets to catch passes from Justin Herbert in Los Angeles.
Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan, is the pick for the Chargers at number 22. Matt, what do you think about Colston Loveland as a prospect here and the selection for the Los Angeles Chargers?
And what I don't think is a particularly strong first round to get the 10th, 11th, 12th best player this late makes a lot of sense to me, even the Michigan connections aside. BP, though, your latest mock, you had Harmon going there, and it's kind of had my wheels turning too. Just is Harbaugh done with big people or D-line help in particular? But this one's a little too good to be true too, and super chalky. So you just accept the gift and take D-line later or whatever, you know.
Look, I'm familiar with Jim Harbaugh's game and his brand, and he's an interesting dude. But you can never count out a big man in the physicality. And I know he's a quarterback, but he likes big guys. And so, yeah, I did have him passing on Loveland and going with Derek Harmon in my latest mock draft. Just because if that's not done, he's going to go to the trenches. And so we'll see where they're at with their team build, but you got to help out Justin Herbert. And so I would love the selection of Colston Loveland as well. And if Harbaugh loves Loveland, he has all he knows how that guy is wired. And so he might know whether he is or is not like someone he wants to tie himself into the NFL level. Because he did pass on a lot of Stanford guys when he came to the San Francisco 49ers, which kind of shocked some people. And he did find someone like Delaney Walker later in the draft to be an interesting tight end piece with the 49ers. So it can go a lot of directions here, but Colston Loveland, obviously a very nice fit for the Chargers in round number 1. Let's check in with the draft dudes, Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino of Locked On NFL Scouting, and they're here with their thoughts on the impact of these selections in episode 4.
Joe, my favorite pick's the last one in the block, Colston Loveland going to the LA Chargers, and there's obviously some familiarity with Coach Harbaugh and his coaching staff, with Loveland coming from Michigan. This is a Chargers team that has spent some free agent dollars and tried to continue to get more physical and build out the complementary elements of their offense with Najee Harris at running back, and they signed Mekhi Becton at offensive guard. They bring back a big body wide receiver, Mike Williams, but none of that really stops me from adding Colston Loveland with this pick to be a long-term fit that you're very familiar with, to kind of blur the lines between 11 and 12 personnel. And it allows you to play heavy, but it allows you to get heavy personnel on the field. But he'll run away and beat safeties and linebackers in coverage. And he's big enough that it is a really tough chore for most corners in coverage. So I love that this allows the Chargers to not just come out and say, hey, we're going to be bully ball and we're going to run 22 personnel. We're going to run right down your throat. They can blur the lines here a little bit. And it's one of those personnel adds that allows them to force opposing defensive staffs to make decisions coming into the week on how they're going to try to choose to play this player. And anytime you could get a player like that, even at pick 22 at a quote unquote devalued position at tight end, makes a lot of sense.
And they're after the Chiefs. The Chiefs gives up tight end production to everybody. So now you got a real guy that can take advantage of a wart with the Chiefs and their defense. That's probably my favorite pick as well.
Well, I'm so glad it's your favorite pick. Loved hearing from those guys. Love the point Kyle Krabs makes there, just about blurring the lines with 11 and 12 personnel, being able to actually hurt you through the passing game in 12 personnel if you want to lean into those heavy packages, something we've brought up in the past before. And also just, that is something that of a wart, for the Chiefs defense, and something that's worked against them, taste of their own medicine, you could say. But I think what it comes down to is just this. If Colston Loveland falls to you at 22, you don't overthink it. And even though this, organization could lean more towards the trenches, as we've seen, I think it would be a pretty easy pick.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this right here is something where you take this guy, you already know him, extremely well because he was at Michigan, the type of makeup, you don't really have to bring him in. Even if you just want to bring him in, just be like, hey, if you're there, we're definitely going to take you. And in this situation, it was just way too perfect. I mean, it's one of those things where you need to add dynamic playmakers, whether that's receiver, whether that's tight end, to your offense. You got to get Lab McConkey help. And we enlisted the help of the 6'6" Colston Loveland.
Yeah, we love the pick. We've talked about him being probably the ideal pick. And I think you're just hoping that the board can fall to you in that way, that you have a chance to add an impact player at multiple positions of need, not just, with tight end with Colston Loveland, because the two top receivers were gone. Kenneth Grant was gone too, so it takes a little bit of the hard conversation about, maybe not taking another Michigan guy or having it be Michigan versus Michigan. But having a guy in Derek Harmon that's there where you'd feel really good about either of those picks. So loved hearing what those guys had to say. Very excited because on Monday, we're getting into our final mock draft of the season, a 2-part, 7-round mock draft where we'll be talking about 10 players the Chargers could select, some players that we would really like to see them select, and get a little bit more into what we haven't so far, which is some day 3 sleepers and guys the Chargers could capitalize late on in the draft. But to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. We will be getting into some fan stuff as soon as we possibly can. Next week, we'll at least do some buy or sell, since we didn't get to do Fan Mail Friday today. But you can also find the show every day on all of our social media. So you can find us on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page as well, where we post the show all the time. But excited, the draft is next Thursday. It's coming up quick. Can't wait to get to our mock draft on Monday. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.